It's almost game day. TCU taking on Stanford on Friday night, and we have a special guest to give us a lowdown on the Cardinal. That's coming up next during Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us wherever podcasts are available. So if you like to listen to it in the old-timey audio form, you can do that as well. Next to me on the screen here is Ben Parker. His Twitter handle is @SlamDunk406. What's the origin of that, Ben? I really like that. Where did that come from?
It just kind of, it was my my email is slamdunk406@yahoo.com. And so when I signed up for Twitter years ago, I just kind of, that was kind of the default handle I was given. I kind of rolled with it. And I'm a big basketball guy, so slam dunk just kind of made sense. And then 406, the story behind that is when I was a kid, our family email was parker406@comcast.net. So I just kind of stuck with the 406 thing, and boom, there we go.
Yeah, I also have a default Twitter handle, but yours is cooler than my generic name. So I like that. And thank you for joining us today. Ben covers Stanford for Stanford Rivals, that website. So check them out and their coverage as we get ready for the game this week. And, Ben, I guess the thing I wanted to start with was what is exciting about the Stanford team, or for people that are following them closely? What are they sort of banking on if this team's going to bounce back after a couple of 3-9 seasons and get back on the right track? What are some of the whether it's intangibles or players, personnel, that should lead them to a successful season if they get there this year?
Yeah, I think it starts with the, a really explosive playmakers in the receiving game. Tiger Bachmeier and Elikai Manor are the kind of two guys headlining that unit. And so I think they're hoping to make a lot of plays in the receiving game. And then also they're hopeful to be a lot better at running back this year. 3 really talented freshmen coming in, and Chris Davis Jr., and Micah Ford, and Cole Tabb. And then along with some returners that are solid as well, and Ryan Butler and Cedric Irvins, I think kind of the combination of like receivers and kind of more depth at running back, I think is a big thing they're looking for offensively. And then defensively, secondary and edge rushers. Actually, the whole linebacking core is pretty solid, and then 2 really good corners on the outside, and Zaraman and then Colin Wright. So that's kind of a snapshot of what they're kind of hoping will kind of propel them to a better year.
In full transparency, I didn't watch a lot of Stanford last year. And so when this came up on the schedule and I was thinking about it a few months ago, like the first thing that popped in my head was more of a pro-style offense, that physicality that they had for years under David Shaw and Jim Harbaugh before him. And then I've turned on the film and I was like, oh, wow, they're kind of spreading it out more. And you mentioned that playmaking they have on the outside with the wide receivers. So I know they still want to be a physical football team, obviously, but I guess what is the identity of a Troy Taylor football team? Like, what does he want this program to be, given his history at Sacramento State and then coming over to Stanford?
Yeah, I think offensively speaking, he wants to have an offense that is innovative and creative and really fits kind of the strength of his players. He likes to be able to, really kind of make plays in the passing game and come up with kind of creative routes and stuff. And then kind of, use running backs in different ways, kind of gadget plays and things like that. So I think like he really likes to just kind of be creative and be aggressive and not be afraid to take some chances, take some shots. And then defensively speaking, under Bobby April, they really pride themselves on being an NFL scheme style defense. That's a little more complex with guys that make a lot of reads and communication. But hopefully that, that can do a good job of kind of going against some of the more difficult offenses they face. So I kind of think a combination of kind of innovation and kind of like pro style on both ends of the ball is kind of what he's looking for.
So Ashton Daniels, the quarterback coming back, was there any sort of battle there, Ben, or was he the guy that, throughout spring and fall camp?
Well, they haven't officially named a starter yet, so we're going to kind of see a combination of him and Justin Lamson, and also Elijah Brown, kind of those 3 guys. Okay. I think Ashton's going to be your starter, even though they haven't formally announced it as such. I think it's a little bit of gamesmanship on Troy Taylor to not want to like reveal who it's going to be, but it's going to be Daniels, I think. And he did a solid job last year. He's a veteran guy. He's a junior, and I think there's a good amount of trust with him. But no, I mean, there's been some competition, and Elijah Brown, the true freshman, who was an early enrollee in the spring, has really impressed the coaches and done a lot of good things. So, it's a situation where I think kind of going in, I think Daniels has kind of been the front runner, but Troy Taylor loves competition and is open to having open competition at multiple positions, not just quarterback. So it's not a situation where Daniels was just said, "Hey, you're the guy." He's going to have to earn it again this year.
How different are those three QBs? I mean, are they all kind of dual threat guys, or are there different parts of the offense that they can unlock? Like, what are they sort of envisioning for, I guess, at least especially with Daniels and then Elijah Brown?
Yeah, so I think with Daniels, he's got a really strong arm. He can make some really kind of deep throws. He can throw the ball really far, and with accuracy as well. And I think just with him as well, just kind of a veteran presence and the huddle guy that his teammates all trust and everything. And I think Elijah Brown, he was rated so high out of high school and has tremendous upside. And I think of the three, probably has the highest ceiling and probably has the best pro prospects. So, it's kind of trying to figure out how do we kind of balance having a more experienced guy who can play with a younger guy that maybe has more upside. And then Justin Lamson's really more of like a running type guy. So you'll probably see him in some goal line situations. That's kind of his forte.
So Elik Ailmanor, the receiver on the outside, that Colorado game, he just torched them. Had like 290 yards, did a lot of work against Travis Hunter. Obviously huge expectations for him, but what was his story, Ben? Did he sort of come out of nowhere last year? Were they building towards this? I mean, he's one of the best receivers in college football, and I assume they're just going to want to feed him the ball as much as possible this year.
Yeah, so he was his true freshman year. He was injured, so he didn't play at all. But before he injured his knee, we were hearing really good things about his speed and how fast he was. So I think as soon as David Shaw got him, I think he knew he had something special in him. He was kind of underrated because underranked by Rivals because he played in Canada, and kind of just I think he then went to play back east somewhere on the East Coast. But being from Canada, he just didn't get the same kind of exposure that he would have had he been an American player. But no, they knew they had something special in him. And then last year was his first year to actually play coming off injury, and he really kind of burst onto the scene. And then it's just kind of been building up from there.
When we come back, we'll ask Ben about this defense, how they're looking to improve this upcoming season. We'll also get later on in the show into some predictions, keys of the game. That's coming up next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I want to quickly tell you about one of our new sponsors, 5 Hour Energy. If you've been in a gas station in the past few years, you see it up there at the front counter, but you might not know that you can actually order 5 Hour Energy online. So if on Friday night you're looking for something to help you make it through that West Coast start at 9:30, if you're old like me and can't stay up like you used to, grab a 5 Hour Energy, order it today. You can build your own flavors. They have a lot of different options. You can build a 24-pack. You can build a 12-pack. Go to 5hourenergy.com today, or you can just find it at your local convenience store, local grocery store. A lot of different options. Use the code LOCKEDONCFB online to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th, so act now. Again, that promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your first order. 5 Hour Energy, a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So, Ben, defensively, I mean, at least from a numbers perspective, they really struggled last year. What are some of the keys for this defense getting better? What do they feel like they can improve on this upcoming season to become a saltier unit on that side of the ball?
Yeah, it starts up front. They brought in a couple. They brought in Clay Patterson, a grad transfer from Yale, up front defensive line, who I think was like second all time in Yale in sacks. So they're hoping that he can be a spark for him. And then Braden Marceau Oleyinka, who's a sophomore, is going to be starting and has had a really amazing kind of fall camp, spring period to get that starting job. So it kind of starts with the defensive line and their ability to put some pressure on the quarterback. And then it also just kind of comes down to the secondary kind of taking those next steps and just really being kind of lockdown defenders on the outside with Colin Wright and Czar Manley at corner. And then also, an impact transfer from Washington and Jay Green, who's a safety. But I think it really kind of starts with the defensive line being able to contain the run, put some pressure on the quarterback, Because I think like if it's a 7-on-7 matchup, like I think they're actually pretty good, but it's kind of the defensive line that's needed the most work, and they're hopeful that it's improved. So it starts up front the trenches. Same with offense for that matter.
Mm-hmm. So weirdly, TCU's playing 2 ACC teams this year. They get Stanford to open the season, and then SMU a few weeks after that. Ben, I mean, I know the Pac-12 implosion that had to really be tough for a lot of people that have followed Stanford for a long time. What does it feel like to be in the ACC? Do people feel disconnected from the conference? I'm sure they're trying to make them feel as welcome as possible. But what's this transition been like to a conference that, is so far away from where Stanford is?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think everyone's used to it now, because it's been like almost a year, like at least 9 months since the announcement, whatever. So I think it's kind of settled in that this is the new reality. I think everyone is excited that they're in a power conference, right? The ACC is a really strong league across multiple sports. I think something that really mattered a lot to Stanford was being able to be in a competitive league for some of the Olympic sports and kind of I'll say minor, but non-revenue sports.
Right.
Such as soccer and baseball and softball, and I mean, obviously, it's a really strong league in basketball as well. So I think that, like, in terms of like kind of well-rounded like athletic league, like I think that like the ACC was really appealing to them, and then there's also like a lot of good academic fits as well. So I think that for Stanford, I think taking the travel out of the equation, I think that if there's a league they had to join, I think this would have been it. Probably the Big Ten would have been number one atop the list, but after that, it would have been the ACC. And so I think as a whole, they're feeling grateful and happy to be in the league. And it helps too that their Bay Area rival Cal is coming with them, so there's a little familiarity there too, which helps.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the trenches earlier. I mean, everything starts up front with football, and for so long, Stanford was known for really turning out great offensive linemen, defensive linemen on both sides of the ball. Do they feel like they're kind of getting back to that? Like, what's the recruiting been like? What does this unit look like up front as far as establishing the line of scrimmage?
Yeah, there are a couple of really good kind of fifth-year guys in Levi Rogers and Connor McLaughlin. Rogers at center and McLaughlin at right tackle, offensive tackle. So, there's some veteran guys there that they're hoping to kind of anchor the unit. And then, basically everybody's back. Simi Pala's back, who's a sophomore offensive guard. He's back. And then they got some good freshmen that are kind of on the two that are like second unit. So, the hope is that it's going to be a better unit and that it's just going to be deeper and more experienced, and that, last year was kind of a learning curve for a lot of guys. But now they kind of went through that experience. So they're definitely hoping that the offensive line will be better just through a combination of, having, just kind of more reps and experience. One interesting kind of note is they have 2 offensive line coaches in Vianney Talamaiva and Al Netter. And so they're really kind of making development. I mean, across the board, every position is key for them. But I think offensive line, having 2 offensive line coaches, that just kind of puts a little more emphasis in that position. And so they're just kind of hoping by putting some extra attention there, that's going to get them back up. And then just kind of on the recruiting trail real quickly, they're currently trying to get a kid named Andrew Babalola, who's like a 4-star recruit and like highly rated. So, kind of word is he's kind of decided between Stanford and Michigan and possibly Auburn, kind of those 3. So they're really trying to also like land some like top prospects as well. They're offering kids that are pretty highly rated at a high school. So it's definitely a position of real focus for them.
What are your keys to the game, Ben? I know that week 1 is always sort of strange. Season openers can be tough to predict, but what does Stanford have to do Friday night to come away with a victory?
I think, first of all, it comes down to like winning the turnover battle and taking care of the ball, right? I think for both teams, honestly, every game that's always key. But I think Stanford needs to make sure that, they don't make any silly passes, silly interceptions, things like that. When they have scoring opportunities, take advantage of them and certainly don't turn the ball over. And then on the flip side, I think they got to find ways to force turnovers as well. If Colin Wright and Zara Manley is as good as they are, those guys got to be able to get some interceptions, force some picks. And then just kind of put some pressure on the offense, just kind of putting pressure on the quarterback. So, and hopefully that can lead to some turnovers. I think forcing turnovers is a big thing, just kind of winning that battle. And then I also think as well, I think that they need to establish the run. That was something that was a bit of a weakness at times last year. So just kind of establishing the run. And then kind of third, just kind of winning the big play battle, like which team makes bigger plays. They got some explosive guys. Iron Man is explosive. Bachmeier is explosive. Can they win that battle? So I think, that those are kind of your 3 kind of keys right there, kind of establishing the run, big plays, then also turnovers.
Yeah, I'm thinking this is kind of a disjointed first half. We'll see both defenses were bad last year, and TCU changed defense coordinators. Stanford's kind of staying the course, trying to get better through continuity. So I'll be curious to see which offense comes out and can get going early. But I think ultimately TCU wins this game. Ben, do you have a prediction? You don't have to give me a score, but what are you feeling just win-loss wise in this one?
It's kind of a toss-up. On my side, I'll probably pick Stanford just because it's a home game and it's season opener.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that TCU being favored makes sense. So I think your prediction for TCU makes a lot of sense. I guess I'll say that intuitively speaking, I would say probably TCU. But just given they're at home and Friday night and opener, this is one that Stanford could steal. But I'll on your show, just be kind to your people. I'll pick TCU, but it's one that could go either way.
He's Ben Parker. We appreciate his insight at SlamDunk406 if you want to follow him on Twitter, and check out Stanford Rivals to get some insight on the team before the game. Ben, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Of course, happy to be on anytime.
We'll come back and wrap things up here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team. Our friends at FanDuel have a great offer right now. If you've ever been like, man, I would love NFL Sunday ticket, but I'm not going to pay for it. I want to watch out-of-market games on NFL Sunday. I want to be that person that just sits on my couch from noon to 9 p.m. and just watches the NFL, follows my fantasy team. Well, FanDuel's got a great deal for you right now. And now it's a limited time. It's only through September 22nd. But all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Do it today. FanDuel, proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. I also want to talk to you about Factor's meal, no prep, no mess. Man, with 4 children in my house, one of the things that is toughest for my wife and I is figuring out each week, what are we going to eat? What are we going to do for dinner every night? It's always crazy at our house between the hours of 5 and 7, keeping kids contained, making sure they get fed. It's a difficult thing. And then the night ends and you're like, okay, what am I going to eat now? Can I eat something? I don't want to make anything. It's tough to, find what you need. They have calorie smart options, protein plus and keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meats are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. No matter how busy you are, you can enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from each week with new flavors to explore. Make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use the code LOCKEDONCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LOCKEDONCollege50 at factormeals.com. LOCKEDONCollege50, get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while this subscription is active. Factor Meals, one of our new sponsors, proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. On yesterday's show, I discussed the prediction that Drake Toll had for TCU's season. He had the Frogs go at 8-4. I also think TCU's going to end up 8-4. Now, we had he went game by game, and I took issue with some of the games he had TCU losing, but we landed on the same record. But I said, listen, this would be kind of a historic thing if they finish with 8 wins, because they haven't done that since 1999. I want to get your thoughts. We got some on YouTube. Share one from Logan Thompson, who's a frequent listener. Logan, thank you for listening to the show. I really appreciate it. He thinks TCU's going to go 7-5. He's not convinced the Lions will hold up as they should. He feels like if the Lions do hold up, O-line and D-line plays well, and they're looking at 9-3 on the season. I think trench play is going to be a huge part of this. I feel like they are as talented as anybody at the skill positions. Now, you need to find out who your guys are going to be. You got a lot of different dudes who could be really good for you. I feel like as the season progresses, you need to dial in and say, okay, this is who we need to get the ball to on a consistent basis. We need to feed these players because they're our most explosive players. Hopefully that's something they can kind of parse out through the first few games of the season. But to me, health of the O-line is going to be a huge deal. And then defensively, it's one thing to bring pressure. It's another thing to consistently get pressure. Can they thrive in this new defense? Because when you're blitzing, when you're bringing extra rushers, that means you're leaving your secondary out in an island more. and you've got some thin depth at corner. So those guys are going to have to step up, and your edge rushers, your linebackers, your D-line, they're going to have to find a way to get to the quarterback and get home to disrupt this passing game. Landman Texas says he's got the Frogs going 9-3. Leo the Greek, who has been a frequent commenter the last few days, says 10-2. I would love to see 10-2. Doug says 11-1 or 10-2. He hasn't beaten UCF, Utah, and Baylor's a blowout win. Kansas could be more difficult. Toss up between Oklahoma State and Arizona. Zoom play has the Frogs in the playoff, which I love the optimism. I love the confidence. We'll see. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that TCU could win all these games on the schedule. But the flip side of that is I think there's going to be a lot of close games, and it's really about how do you execute, how do you zone in and hone in on the detail-oriented aspect of football that you really struggled at last year and get to a place where you can be good at those things and pull out these, one-score ball games. Matt Clark says on the optimistic side, the 2023 offensive line were put together in very short order. Colton Deary and Willis Patrick didn't join the team until the summer. Sonny made sure to get his his O-line together very early in the transfer portal process, except for Brockermeyer. Hopefully things will translate into a better cohesive team than they had in 2023. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. A lot of these guys that are starting, and even some guys who are too deep, like Remington Strickland, Ben Taylor Whitfield. Ben Taylor Whitfield's been here for an entire year, obviously, but yes, there is more cohesiveness on the O-line. Now, Brockermeyer is a huge piece of this because he's your center. I mean, he's going to be calling a lot of the protections, doing a lot of the communication, getting the team ready and getting that O-line ready to block on a consistent basis. But it's still going to take a little bit of time, and that's why I think Stanford's going to be an interesting ball game. How quickly can you get that line together and block up these protections, right, so Josh Hoover has time to throw. But Stanford really struggled defensively last year, and I think over the course of an entire season, there's really not a way that you can scheme around bad O-line play. I do feel like in short bursts, like in a game, in a couple series, like there are things you can do to give your offensive line some time to get chemistry together, to get playing together. And so all that can be positive. But, they're going to show up, man. They have to show up and play well from the jump. And Josh Hoover's got to play better too. He's got to protect the ball better. He has to make better decisions. Sonny Dykes talked about this, and he said during fall camp, for whatever it's worth, like he did do those things at a higher level. But there were too many just forced throws, silly mistakes, and not only interceptions, but interceptions in bad spots and really momentum swinging moments in the game just from plays that he couldn't make or he shouldn't have, balls he shouldn't have thrown. So that's going to be a big key. But as I've said all week, the great thing is we're going to get a glimpse of it here in, a day or so. Like we're actually going to get to see this team on the field, have a better idea of what they look like. We'll get to see Andy Avalos in a game situation. He'll be up in the booth, but we'll get to see this defense. What does the scheme look like? A lot of exciting things coming from this group this year. So I appreciate Ben Parker joining the show. Again, you can find him on Twitter at SlamDunk406 if you want to read more about where Stanford's at and what they're doing. I will have keys to the game and, one more kind of final prediction and final thoughts tomorrow. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.